So I'm looking through my work scrapbook, and I will show this later on. It's essentially the binder that I showed you guys how to alter. And I've been treating it as a work scrapbook, so I keep receipts here. And while I was flipping through it, I came across this that I was going to hole punch and include in here. But this was a scrap piece of the fabric that I was testing out for my Fabric Simplicity Traveler's Notebook journals. And I just did a fabric swatch. And I think I'm going to use this idea in my journals. This is one of the covers for the journals that I'm making. As you can see, it's very tattered, lots of layers, and I'm doing more of a mixed media approach with them. So I can include pieces like this, like very raw and organic pieces, but in the linen and lace styles. I think we have an idea here. In the middle of decorating one of the pages, and I found this beautiful green, kind of teal fabric. It's more green in person, and it's a beautiful shade of green that reminds me of grass. And call me crazy, but I think what would look beautiful here is some embroidery, perhaps some flowers, kind of like growing out of the grass. And I think that would be a really, really nice way to decorate this page. And I have my embroidery thread already picked out. I just use regular DMC thread. And these are vintage. As you can see, the label is a lot different than the ones you'd find like at Hobby Lobby. This is some of my vintage thread that I've been saving. So I'm going to be using these for little flowers and this for the stems. So let's see how this turns out. I have a couple of scraps pulled out, some that I have stenciled on, some newspaper clippings, recipe pages, floral paper, some music paper strips, fuzzy cut flowers, and then some typewriter font word phrases, and then some little notes. And then these are some vintage color slide films that have photographs on them. So I'm just taking one side and I'm putting some fabric glue, and then I'm just pressing in the floral design right in the center. This is just some little scraps of floral wallpaper. And this is the back cover of one of my journals. And I think I'm going to put it on the back. I really like how it looks right there. So we will see what I end up using it for, but I think I'm going to put it on the cover. I'm back from the antique store, and this is all of the things that I purchased, just so that you see some of the things before they go into a journal, and to help you guys when you guys are going to antique stores, flea markets, thrift stores. These are some of the things that I pick up and that you can incorporate in your journal, or special mementos that you can also use to store your crafty things. This is one of the pieces that I fell in love with. It's a little mini sewing box, and it opens up. You can store everything inside that you need it to. It's got the little windows, so I'm going to be storing some vintage thread and buttons in here. I also purchased this, which is a vintage little tea container. I loved it. The colors make me so happy, and I'm actually going to be storing vintage buttons in here. Moving on to paper and stamps. These were actually some vintage stamps that I purchased. They're vintage wooden stamps, and they have signatures. The thinner that your stamp is, the more clear the image will be. They're hard to find, but when you find them, I definitely suggest purchasing them because they're a rare treasure that will live forever in your journals because you can stamp them as long as you'd like. So, loved those vintage stamps. I purchased 4 vintage postcards. They're so cool, and the edges are perforated too, which I thought was really neat. So these are some vintage postcards that will be going inside the journals, and a vintage booklet that has some really cool paper inside. This is one of the books that I purchased. It's a yearbook from 1938, and it has the whole year of 1938, and every single page has writing. I love finding treasures like this because this was someone's handwriting, and this was someone's writing and thoughts onto paper, which is exactly what we're doing with our journals, but having something like this with the date. So I'll definitely be including some pages from the yearbook in the journals. And then this book here, like I said, it doesn't really look that interesting, but when you open it up, it's so cool. I already pulled apart some of the pages because I want to use these to make some pockets, and I'll probably share that later on in the video. I love the colors in here. If you notice, like vintage books, like vintage children's books, they stuck to like a 3 to 4 color palette. So the colors throughout the whole book are blues, greens, and this orangey mustard color. And that's the colors that they stick with throughout the whole book. Probably because it was more affordable doing that, and they couldn't really mix colors because there wasn't that much technology for printing. So I love that. I mean, look at that little lammy. Oh. I've got some yarn, and this is actually some crochet yarn, and this is French, I believe. Yeah, it's Parisian cotton, made in France. I also purchased this vintage quilt, and this just made me squeal like a little girl waiting for the ice cream truck. If you look at this, there's so much material here. You can simply trim this off, add a little button, sew it to the side of a page, and you have a beautiful historical embellishment. Like, look at these colors here, the mints and the turquoise, and you have the brights. They're so cool. I also purchased these 2 linen napkins. The color of this is just beautiful. As you can see, this is a stark white, and that's a cream, and it's even more cream in person. I have lots to go. Lots to go. There's going to be a lot of collage in these journals. I want to represent a little bit more of myself in these journals as I see them as artwork. So let's share how the process goes. I also want to incorporate some of the vintage quilt pieces that you'll see me use. And I've got all my mixed media stuff next to me. So let's get back to work. A beautiful pile of embroidered fabrics and trims. Look at this lace. Little berries and leaves. I've got some more textiles here. I also have some pressed flowers that I'm going to be including in the journals. These are beautiful, and they're from my garden. Look at these, they're so cute. Really beautiful. Blooms of the berry. Blooms of the Rainbow. That's what it should be called. So beautiful. So my sister just brought me this little rose, you guys. Look. This is definitely going in my journal, so I'm going to start pressing it and drying it out to put it in my journal as ephemera. I am working on sewing these little embellishment pieces onto the side, as well as finishing up the first signature, which you'll see more of later on in the finished flip. So it's another day, and I found some of my vintage sewing ephemera. I decided to sew a little bit of this vintage tape measure on the side of the page. I thought that was a really cool little touch. I love how with the journals I'm using vintage pieces and giving them new purpose. This actually just arrived in the mail. It's a vintage little diary. It's French and it's for the month of September. I think it'll be cute to include a couple of these pages in here. I hope that you guys loved this video. Thank you so much for watching. The journals will be available this Sunday at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I hope that your day is filled with a huge abundance of peace and love. Bye-bye.